By looking at this video, you probably think I'm a normal Canadian girl playing in the snow. But the fact is, you couldn't be further from the truth. My name is Emily Burke, and I'm a TCK. TCK stands for Third Culture Kid, and it refers to people who are raised in a culture other than their parents or the culture of their country of nationality, and also live in a different environment during a significant part of their childhood development years or important times in their life. My parents are Canadian, and so am I, but I don't entirely feel like I'm Canadian. I've lived all my life overseas. I was born in the Middle East, and not too long after, my family moved to Taiwan. I don't have too many memories from living in Taiwan because we didn't stay there long, but the memories I do have from there were good. I did feel like an outsider in Taiwan because the other kids I went to school with all spoke Mandarin, and I did not. Almost everyone and everything was in a language I didn't quite understand. After a few short years of living in Taiwan, my family moved to the Philippines. I associate most of my childhood with the Philippines because I feel like I really grew up here. I was 6 when my family first moved here, and now I'm 17 and still in the Philippines. I have really enjoyed growing up here because it was quite a different experience than living in Taiwan. Even though the Philippines does have a main language they use that isn't English, a lot of people here do speak English, so I don't feel as out of place. One thing someone told me once was, "Sometimes I forget you're not Filipino," and I replied with, "Me too." I feel comfortable here in the heat and surrounded by people and languages of different cultures. One thing I realized is that when I visit Canada every summer, I'm constantly reminded of the fact that I'm a third culture kid. My family in Canada doesn't quite understand how I'm different and how I've been changed by growing up in different places. An interesting habit I noticed that my family and I have picked up is that when we're in the Philippines, we say home to talk about Canada. But when we're in Canada, we say home to talk about the Philippines. I've also realized that a lot of Southeast Asian or Asian countries I visit I feel comfortable in. Even though I may have never been to some of them before, they remind me of Taiwan or the Philippines or the people I know from those places. Something special I got to experience recently was going to Canada for Christmas for the first time. It was my first time to experience snow, and I found it quite fascinating. It was also interesting for my parents to talk about winters when they were younger, or have them watch me experience something they grew up with for the first time. Having this experience of a first winter helped me feel closer to the place I'm from. In a dwindling amount of time, I will soon be moving to Canada to go to college. I think that it'll be an interesting experience for me because it will be the longest amount of time I will be in Canada. I am anticipating the fact that since I consider various parts of Asia as my home, it might make my feelings of homesickness more than other people I might meet. In some ways, I'll feel comfortable there, being around more people that look like me, and exploring the country where I'm from, but in other ways, it will be harder for me because my parents will be on the other side of the world, and the rest of my family might not quite understand that. A class assignment I received once was to show my identity through some sort of writing or visual piece. Normally, I would choose a writing piece, but this time I had an idea to create a piece of art, which I almost never do. I decided to take a picture of myself and put the flags of Canada, Taiwan, and the Philippines on certain parts of me to represent certain parts of my identity. Here's an excerpt of the reflection I wrote for the piece. The Canadian flag over my face represents who I am biologically. The Philippine flag on my clothes represents me being in the Philippines and growing up here. The Philippine flag on my eye represents how I see the world through the eyes of the Philippines and how living here has impacted me. The Taiwanese flag on my other eye represents how living in Taiwan influenced me, and it also represents how I see the world through the eyes of Taiwan as well. Living overseas has given me a way to see the world through different eyes and experience many different cultures.
Now that I haven't been in my TCK country for 5 years and have been back in my birth country, it's hard to say. I feel at home in both places in different ways, but mostly here because my family is here and most of my friends from my first time in my TCK country have moved back to their birth countries or elsewhere in the world. So there isn't much familiarity for me if I were to go back to where I grew up anyways. I feel a little out of place here, but also feel like if I went back to the country I grew up in, I wouldn't feel like it was the same place I left.
When I think of home, the first thing that comes to mind is my town in southern Alberta. Having never actually left the country, it's hard to really think of Canada itself as home because it's so big, but rather a broader extension of my identity, something to take pride in.
I was born in Mexico. However, my family is in New Zealand and Australia. I have also lived most of my life in China.
I don't really feel like I have a home, as weird as it sounds. I know I have a house, but that isn't the same as the concept of home. I was born in Florida, but my preteen developmental years were spent in the Philippines. Therefore, I feel a loyalty to both countries and think of both and neither as my home.
I generally think of Nova Scotia as my home. However, since I moved away when I was 18 and have been moving back and forth since only to settle in Victoria, it's a lot harder to feel like my home is one particular place. Canada is very large, and living on two opposite ends of it can be very difficult. Nova Scotia is where I'm from and have my roots, but my home is in Victoria as well. I have people I love in both places, and I feel deeply connected to both places.
I would consider China as my home. After having to leave the previous country I was in, it was definitely a place where I felt safe and at home. This is where I spent my childhood years and learned a language I've been able to continue learning.
I think of Maryland as home, even though I have lived in numerous US states and internationally.
I think it's a very hard question because I'm not really sure, and it's hard for me to choose a location because I think home is wherever I'm surrounded by people who love and support me, wherever I can feel like myself. But I think if I had to settle in like one location, I would choose America because I think I would have the most opportunities there. I would get to express myself, be myself, as well as get to be with family and friends, and I think I would also get to meet a lot of new cool people.
When I went to college and after college, it's been 1.5 years since I graduated, I've felt it has made it more difficult for me to make long-lasting connections with people here in my home/birth country. Relationships were especially difficult to build in college because I had little to relate to locals and I felt like an outsider in my own country.
Not seeing my family and feeling sad when my family is together and I see photos of them.
Not having a set place as home.
I just get confused sometimes when people ask me simple questions like where I'm from. For example, in one of my classes, we had to do an assignment related to our culture. I had no idea what to do because my nationality doesn't have much of a culture. And if it did, I probably wouldn't feel very connected to it anyway. I also didn't feel comfortable doing it about the culture of where I currently live because I consider it home, but it still doesn't feel right.
I didn't grow up around a lot of my family. Most of my life I've lived in different countries, and living halfway around the world for most of my relatives, I never really get to spend time with them. A lot of my life I've known to get 2 months to really travel and spend time with them. I guess when I was a younger kid, I never really paid attention to it. As I get older, I realize that most of the time the family I know are people through screens that I will eventually get to see.
I wish my parents and teachers would have known of and better prepared me for the loneliness of being back home, and most of all, of leaving my friends behind after high school, knowing I might not see them again. And the envy then that comes with seeing people in my birth country still be able to easily see their high school friends in person, or run into them in the city by accident.
I am constantly translating in different languages to find the right word.
probably having to understand that it sucks sometimes to be between both worlds, and that it's not great all the time. And while it's a good opportunity, the reality is it wasn't a choice.
For us TCKs, it can be hard once we get older because we're not always able to connect with other kids around us. The majority of other kids we go to school with or are friends with are non-TCKs.
Sometimes I feel left out or feel a little alone for not understanding their culture, their language, and people not understanding me or where I'm from.
Being a TCK has mainly positively impacted my life in that I feel like I can more easily sympathize with others that have different viewpoints than me. And at the time, living in the country that I wasn't born in, I felt like it allowed me a lot of opportunities that I otherwise wouldn't have had or noticed.
I got to learn and understand different cultures and learn languages. I lived in 4 different countries before I was 10.
It has positively impacted me by giving me insight into different cultures.
Being able to learn about so many different cultures and meeting people from all over the world.
I've been able to learn different languages, meet people from amazing places, and experience things that not many people get to do.
I know that not many people get to have the experience that I get to have, where I've seen and experienced different cultures, have had new opportunities, and met people from various backgrounds.
I wish that TCKs were talked about more, because sometimes it feels like there aren't many of us, and sometimes we can feel a little alone. There may be more TCKs than we realize, but when there are more non-TCKs that surround us, it can be really hard to connect and understand with everyone else. A lot of people don't know we feel this way.
I think that it would be interesting if in classes such as English or social science, we could read texts or stories that feature third culture kids or kids who have gone to international school and have that kind of experience, because I haven't really seen that kind of representation, and I think that would be really interesting.
For my family, I found it a very good experience for my child to be raised as a third culture kid, even though we did not know about the term until we came to an international school. My child has gained a wealth of experience by traveling and living overseas. This has not been without challenges, since it is hard to maintain friendships with classmates when you won't be coming back to the country where you were previously attending school. As children grow and move on from primary to secondary school, they lose old friendships and gain new ones, and this is natural. However, as a TCK, it can happen without warning, depending on the situation of the parents, or with only a few months' notice. I believe that TCKs have the ability to overcome these sorts of shocks easier, since they see friends move on to new countries and know that they too will likely live in another country at some point in the future. Returning home to their native country can be a challenge, since they have left old friends behind and have to try to either reconnect with them or establish new friendships. Thankfully, in this day and age, they can have instant contact through email and social media, so those truly valuable relationships can be maintained in some fashion, even if they are no longer together.
When I lived in America before leaving the country, I was in the 5th grade. I realize now in hindsight just how ignorant I was. I couldn't tell you the difference between India, Indonesia, or Indiana. I moved to India for my 5th grade year and was exposed to some major culture shock. The first thing that hit me was the smell of it all. So many new scents I was unfamiliar with, such as the diversity of food, general body odor, and choice of colognes or perfumes, and the exhaust of rickshaws and cars. It was nothing like anything I'd ever experienced before. As I got to my new house and more used to the different jobs, such as drivers or maids, I was more reclusive and stayed on a laptop emailing my friends, who I considered my only real attachment to where I called home. Further into the year, Going to school and making friends, I slowly adjusted to life outside of the States. I grew to be more aware of worldwide problems instead of nationwide problems, and grew to be more adventurous. I would try new foods, I would go to more activities with my church, I would try more extracurricular things at school. I started to be more excited to wake up and go through my day. After a year in India, my family and I left for the Philippines. The general consensus was very positive, but personally I missed the architecture, flavors, and raw camaraderie I shared with people in India. However, I did have an amazing experience in the Philippines. I was more used to culture shock, but still had a chaotic time for a while. I spent 4 years in the Philippines and developed many talents such as theater and tennis. As I left the Philippines and returned to America, I discovered a newfound passion for robotics and engineering because of my experiences out of my home country. I'm able to enter with a unique outlook on life compared to those who have never left the country they were born in. Being a TCK can be both a blessing and a bit of a curse. However, it is mostly better. Being a TCK provides you with a completely different worldview, and after you become one, you're never the same. Being a TCK also means that you never truly know where you belong and how you fit into the world. I personally never really understood prejudice and racism because I grew up around people not like me, and it's made me realize that we aren't so different. I also want people like teachers and parents to know that it's not always easy, especially when no one around you understands what it's like to be a TCK. If you're at an international school, maybe set up places for TCKs to come together and share their experiences with each other. Let them educate other students what it's like to be a TCK and how it can help better your life and our future. I hope that more people can learn about TCKs through this and various projects like it. TCKs are good for this world because we have experienced more cultures and understand more about the world.